Welcome back to Casual Card Games. It's been a while since I've done a discussion video with you guys, but lately, for the last 2 weeks, I've been getting back into Yu-Gi-Oh! A little bit. I know I posted something on the channel about a year ago saying I was going to get back into it, and then that lasted for like a week. And maybe right now, at this moment, I'm a little bit at my burnt out point with Yu-Gi-Oh! Just because basically what I've done is I still play Magic once a week with my buddies. They come over, we play Commander. But I've been hopping on Master Duel for Yu-Gi-Oh! And getting back into that, and not only trying to see what new cards my old decks have gotten, because when I left Yu-Gi-Oh! In the summer of 2020, I had basically 25 to 28 decks, something like that. These are either decks I had in person, or if I didn't I think there was maybe two or three that I had broken up, but I still had most of the core in person. But yeah, there was about three that I never got a chance to actually build and play, but yeah, I would say 25 that I actually used, and I have a big long list. But anyway, that's been fun just diving back into that. So I have been having fun with Yu-Gi-Oh! But then with Master Duel, you don't get any rewards for playing casual games, so you have to play ranked. So in 2 weeks, and I hadn't played ranked matches on Master Duel ever. So, and this is coming from somebody that played the game since 2002, not at a competitive level. I mean, I went to a regional here and there, but overall I was never on the competitive scene trying to make it to a YCS or something like that. But I would observe what was going on. I was very aware of like metas and stuff like that. But basically, I mean, there's a few rants I'd like to go on, and I guess I'll talk about it when I hit it. But I thought about splitting this up into like 4 separate videos, but honestly, I'd rather just knock it out in one, and that way people aren't having to click on 4 separate things to just get my opinions on these things. But I would hope if you're someone like me that's played Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic, and when I say Magic, I'm talking about Commander. Everything that I'm saying about Magic is coming from a Commander perspective. So if you play Standard or if you play Legacy or Modern, this isn't real. Like, I'm not going to be able to speak from your point of view because I don't play those formats. So I did a quick list of top 5 things I love about Magic, and when I say Magic, I'm meaning Commander. Top 5 things I love about Yu-Gi-Oh! Top 5 things I hate about Magic, and top 5 things I hate about Yu-Gi-Oh! Let's do the love first for both of them. Let's be positive. And I just want to say first, I thought about artwork, but really I love the artwork of Magic cards and Yu-Gi-Oh! I really can't pick. I mean, don't get me wrong, I think Magic is more consistent of the quality of their artwork. And there are definitely Yu-Gi-Oh! Archetypes that have come out, I would say, in the last 5 years that you can just tell that they may call it some cute and cuddly archetype. They're like, hey, the artwork's supposed to look like it was drawn by a 5-year-old. And I'm like, but part of that is they're coming up with archetypes that they know that they can get, like, they can hire someone that's not as good of an artist and they can pay them less because they just need more archetypes to be spit out. But yeah, overall, I like the artworks for both. But let's do Yu-Gi-Oh! Was first for me. It was my first game. So I'll go into that first, and I'll start for all these. I'll go 5-1. So top 5 things I love about Yu-Gi-Oh! We'll go number 5, the online play. So, and this is something that Magic has Arena, but there's no Commander on Arena, so that doesn't do anything for me. I know they have another format. I think it's called Gladiator, where I think it's 100 card singleton, but it's not cards like in the command, like you can't go back like a card made 15 years ago and find it and put in your deck. I'm pretty sure because they haven't put those on the game. But playing Master Duel, it's been nice that I can basically go back, build a deck. I mean, I have my own rant on what I would improve, but if I'm just talking about in general, originally the first one that I remember was Dueling Book, which I use now to kind of just archive my decks, but I'm not going on Dueling Book to play anybody. The problem with Dueling Book is that you have to be in charge of the mechanics of when things happen. You have to write effect every time an effect happens. And when someone else is going off, you have to sit there and they'll ask, effect, is that okay? And you have to say okay every single time to let them know you don't have a response to stuff. So that gets old and boring. Sometimes a mechanics interaction, you won't know. They'll be like, oh, I'm going to call a judge for that. And you basically are an admin. You have to sit there. I mean, back in the day, you had to sit there and wait. Sometimes it would be fast, like within 2 minutes. And other times you'd be sitting there waiting 30 minutes to an hour. And at the end of the day, you're like, this is just not worth it. So they had that. Then they had Yugioh Pro, which I had around 2014, 2015, 2016. That was fun, and that was overall good. But then they came out with Master Duel, which what I like about it is obviously I got my Xbox. I can just fire it up, and it's right there. And it's nice and clean on my screen. And I love that. My beef with Master Duel would just be that I don't like that they have their own custom ban list. I wish it would just be, do you want to play TCG? Do you want to play OCG? What do you want to do? And if you're playing those formats, you play against people that are in those formats. Not saying that the TCG ban list doesn't need to be tweaked. That's another thing that I'll talk about. But yeah, the Magic, like I said, Arena, I tried using it once, and I basically was like, well, if it's got no commander, I just don't really have a whole lot of interest in that. I know there's Brawl, but Brawl's 60 cards, and it's, like I said, just stuff from the last 2 years, and you miss out on so many cards. Like, I wouldn't... It's like taking a Yu-Gi-Oh deck, and I'm trying to think of a good example, but let's say, like, Dark Magicians, and telling someone, well, you can only play the cards, like, that came out in the last 2 years to play Dark Magicians, and you'd be like... Okay, and you'd lose out on a lot of old stuff that was printed that would be good for that deck. I'm just using that as an example. The next thing that I love about Yu-Gi-Oh! Number 4, having an extra deck. So, there's a pro and con to it. Obviously, Magic not having an extra deck, it just means that like cards in the deck are not as consistent. You basically, your commander is your one card extra deck. But the thing I miss about having an extra deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is like, yeah, you could run stuff in your main deck that like, this is my archetype, but then you go, okay, with what my archetype does, what extra stuff, extra deck, but what extra deck monsters can go with this strategy that I could actually make? Because there's a lot of times you might end your board with something that you're like, that's not all that impressive, but can I make anything with these monsters? And it's kind of like, can I turn this deck, can I mold this into something? And don't get me wrong, there's a fine line between doing what I'm talking about, which is, hey, my deck's going to do these things anyway, and my extra deck is kind of just there if I need it, but it doesn't run on it. And then there's the other thing, which is basically people build their whole decks just to get out busted extra deck monsters. So there's a pro and con to that. But overall, I do miss it. I do like having an extra deck. And if I want to work on building my own game, and I have the basic premise in mind, but one of the things I want to get back is having an extra deck would be nice. Number 3 is the nostalgia factor. I mean, Magic, for me, I don't go back that far with the game. I mean, like, I was originally introduced to Magic in, like, 2010, 2011, and it was just playing Standard. It was Standard Mill, and that was fun, and I had a good time with it, but at the same time, there's no... I can't look back on old memories back, I remember when I was doing that. Basically, my Magic experience is, like, the last 5.5 years is how long I've been playing Commander, but that's basically it. I mean... That's as far back as it goes. I don't have anything besides that. Yu-Gi-Oh! I go back 21 years at this point, 2002. I didn't... When initial Legend of Blue Eyes came out, I don't remember that coming out, but I remember Metal Raiders, and like my first pack was Metal Raiders, so yeah, I go back quite a long ways. I was 10 at the time, but yeah, because, we all collected Pokemon cards, at least people of my era, we collected Pokemon, but I had no idea how to play the game. Obviously, I watched the show, and I played the Game Boy game and the Pokemon game and the Nintendo 64 games, but I had no idea how to play the card game, so you would just collect them. And eventually Yu-Gi-Oh! Came out, and you could watch the show and learn how to play the game. So it was like, okay, this makes much more sense, which, in my opinion, was dynamite for Yu-Gi-Oh! That you had a show along with it that actually taught you how to play a game. Pokemon, that's all. The show has nothing to do with the card game except for the characters that are in it, the Pokemon. But, yeah, Yu-Gi-Oh! What draws me back, and like I said, I don't think I ever want to get back into the game where I'm collecting the cards again, just for the fact of I think it'd be too much money, and it literally never ends. Like, we'll get to it, but the cool thing about Commander is I can build a deck, and obviously when a new set comes out, I can check and be like, on the off chance, is there anything in this that might actually work with my deck that isn't just a staple that costs like, crazy money? Most of the time there's not, but if there is, it's like, okay, you can take a Commander deck, let it sit there for 2 years, and then play it again. And in Commander, you might want to tweak a few things in the span of 2 years. Maybe a few things change. A new card comes out that helps a certain color. But overall, that's not going to seriously cripple your deck. If you, like, for me, what I'm figuring out is in the 3.5 years that I've been out of Yu-Gi-Oh!, or at least 3 years that I've been out of Yu-Gi-Oh!, I don't want to say it's complete night and day, but a lot of my decks, it's like, oh, that's different, that's different, that's different, you can run this. And drawing that distinction between cards that are too busted and things that I like. Anyway, so yeah, but there's a lot of nostalgia, because like I said, I have so many different eras of Yu-Gi-Oh! There's the original Duel Monsters era with Yugi and Joey, and that was when I was like middle school, high school, well, elementary school to middle school. And that was fun, but that was like I didn't really know how to build a deck properly. We didn't really have archetypes. And then I have the GX era where I got into it, loved the show. And then, but I was going into high school, so I was like, I'm not I don't want to, ruin my chances with girls by being like, hey, I'm playing Yu-Gi-Oh, sorry. Then I get into high school, and then I realize, like, my senior year, I don't really care anymore. Like, if a girl likes me, she's going to like me for who I am, and she's not going to, downgrade me because I play Yu-Gi-Oh. And turned out to not be the case. But no, but I eventually was like, I don't really care. I'm just going to do what I want to do. So I would play Yu-Gi-Oh! And I got back into it around 2009, 2010, 2011. And then I got back out of it because I joined the military. And then I came back and got back into it again. So anyway, I have different stages of Yu-Gi-Oh! And I kind of play it throughout the whole time. I wouldn't leave the game for very far, for too much amount of time. But yeah, so anyway, we'll move on to the next one. Number 2 for me, what I love about Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck building. So yes, I do like deck building in Commander. It's just slightly different because, like, take Zur the Enchanter. Zur the Enchanter is the second deck I ever made. That's a deck that, and in a certain aspect, you can go a bunch of different directions, but at the same time, it's like, clearly you're just going to do, CMC 3 mana or less enchantments. That's what you're going to build your deck around. That's what he does. Pretty straightforward. But I think a lot of times, like, Commander decks do end up playing similar with as far as what you're trying to do. There's only so many different cards of what you, and it's crazy because there's a ton of cards that you can play in Magic, but at the end of the day, you can run counter spells, you can run a token deck, you can run a big creatures deck, big mana deck, big instances sorceries, return things, discard. There are different strategies, but Yu-Gi-Oh! I feel like even when monsters are coming out and they spam the board, at some instances they're trying to do different things, they interact differently. Like I said, as of right now, I have, I think, 13 Commander decks, 12, with a few on ice that I'm, like, working on trying to make. So at the end of the day, I think it's probably, like, closer to 17, 18 of, like, things that I'm like, yeah, I have an idea for what I want to build. But as of right now, I think I have 12 solid decks, borderline 13 that I'm like, these things are ready to go that I could bust out tomorrow and play my buddies with. With Yu-Gi-Oh! At my peak, I had 25 decks. And part of that is because Magic, you're playing, it's 100 cards. Granted, a lot of that's lands, but, it's a 100 card format with in Commander. With Yu-Gi-Oh!, you're only having to do 40 cards per deck. So a lot of times that's, hey, give me 3 copies of that, 3 copies of that, 3 copies of that. And then you fill out your extra deck. So it's 55 cards basically. But that's all you got to do. So I guess when you include the lands, it's actually not that much different. But it just feels like in Yu-Gi-Oh! You could be like, all right, I know I need these cards for my deck. I guess it's because you're playing multiple copies that you don't have to brainstorm and go. It'd be harder if you had to do a singleton for Yu-Gi-Oh! That'd be a lot harder to put a deck together. And I do have one of those. The dark deck that I made was 60 card singleton, just a fun jank dark deck that I would always love. And it occasionally would get some wins, but I would not consider that a strong, powerful deck. But it wasn't supposed to be. But deck building, I don't know, just something about Yu-Gi-Oh! I guess that might tie into the nostalgia part of it, but I just enjoy working on a Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck, going, this works, this doesn't work, whatever. With Magic, I don't know, I feel like you alternate strategies and go, okay, I tried this package of stuff, that didn't work, I tried this, whatever. But overall, I don't know, Magic, sometimes it's not even that the cards you picked weren't good, it's just the situation that you came in, that interaction, it just didn't work out. Yu-Gi-Oh! I feel like you can tell, because things not having mana cost, if something sits in your hand and you're like, this is not doing anything for me, it's pretty quick to go, I need to take that out. Or other times you just go, hey, I don't really care what the consequences are, I'm going to roll with it. The number one thing I love about Yu-Gi-Oh! Is archetypes. So, and once again, every single one of these, there's like a pro and a con, where like there's a happy medium. Yu-Gi-Oh! Did archetypes. Magic, I guess technically they have some things you might consider archetypes, but basically it's just tribal stuff. They have dragons, they have goblins, they have, wizards, stuff like that. With Yu-Gi-Oh!, Toons is an archetype, Spirits is an archetype, Elemental Heroes, Gravekeepers. I could keep going on. But anyway, there's so many different deck ideas that if you just said, well, what does the deck do? Like if I'm describing what Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks do to a Magic person, I'd be like, Neospatians are built around this one monster elemental hero Neos and all these other smaller, 5 of these smaller creatures, monsters, that basically confuse together with that one guy and turn him into something. And sometimes they do more than one to fuse them into something. And that's a cool idea. Like, Magic doesn't really have fusions. That's the thing that kind of sucks. I wish it did, but it doesn't. But yeah, these decks do something different. I have a Final Countdown deck. I call it my Biff deck, but it's basically a Final Countdown deck. I'm just trying to stall everybody out. Yes, Magic, there's kind of an equivalent to that, but you can just stall someone out in Magic just because, you lock the board down and you don't really have anything to do with the rest of your cards. In Yu-Gi-Oh, that's a very rare thing to go, I just want to, not stun, but literally just slow the game down where I'm trying to just kill you one card draw at a time. So yeah, it's very different. I don't know. Yu-Gi-Oh and Magic have different play styles, and at the like they both can be repetitive at the same time because Yu-Gi-Oh, a lot of decks just ended up spamming monsters, main deck or extra deck. In Magic, you could say a lot of it is basically just get out the biggest board creatures, or play your biggest CMC spells or your best value CMC spells. Like, because some people it's all about everything's 3 mana or less, the CEDH versus EDH argument. But yeah, I just miss all the archetypes that I used to play. That's like I love agents, I love cyber dragons, cyber darks. I love all these different archetypes that in Magic it's just, you might like a commander or a deck, but I don't know if it's the same thing where you like, I don't know if people are as passionate and loyal in Magic about the decks that you play as opposed with Yu-Gi-Oh. I mean, don't get me wrong, like I have my commanders, I'm like, yeah, I love that commander, I love playing that deck. It's just not the same as like in Yu-Gi-Oh, you can tell like hero players, they were notorious for like, yeah, I'm a hero player, and like, oh god, you're one of those. So it's just funny. I mean, Brendan, the guy on the channel, he loves Monarchs. Ever since they came out, he loved them. And people give him crap for that, but he's like, he loves them. Blue Eyes is another one. He loves Blue Eyes. I like Dark Magician. So, all right, let's go to the top 5 things I love about Magic. Number 5 is a lack of power creep. So I've seen, I've watched videos with Vince Pleasant Kenobi and the Professor. They did a dies to removal segment about this, where they talk about, is it good to have power creep or not? And they decided that at the end of the day, you'd still rather have a Magic set pushing to kind of be like, hey, we want to make powerful cards. And I would agree with that you don't want to just like go, hey, underpowered. You want to print cards that people want to put in decks. I think that's your number one objective when you're making cards for a card game is, I want to make things that people want to play. You don't always have to make it busted. That's the difference. You don't have to make it busted, but it just has to be powerful enough or interesting enough where someone goes, I want to run that card. But Yu-Gi-Oh, and like I said, I'll get into it, but there's a vast difference in what Yu-Gi-Oh has become to what Magic has become. Overall, since I've been playing Commander since the beginning of 2018, has the game increased to a speed? Yes, it has. It's gotten faster. But I would say it's not so fast that I'm just like, oh my gosh, I hate this game. The game does not feel degenerate, even still. You have a chance to do things. I would say if Commander ever gets to the point where games are lasting like 4 turns or less consistently, then I would say you need to work on the ban list and start hitting things. But as of right now, games can last a crazy amount of time. Part of it is having multiple players on the table, but in general, that's something that Magic has done very well of keeping themselves in check with, okay, we might make one really powerful card in a set that like eventually might need to be banned, but overall they don't really try to do that. They're like, here's a new card, it is powerful, but because of mana cost, it's always just like, well, yeah, just because you have this in your hand doesn't mean it's really going to be worth all that. The things that basically are broken in Magic are things that can cheat mana cost, reduce their own mana cost, stuff like that. Okay, number 4 is the community. The Magic community. And what I mean by that is, so playing Yu-Gi-Oh, and I'll get to that later, but it's night and day difference for me between the Yu-Gi-Oh community and the Magic community. With the Magic community, everyone is mostly pretty positive and understanding of the fact that like, I'm a casual player, I'm not out here trying to build a CEDH deck. Don't get me wrong, if I pick a commander and I really like it, at the end of the day, I am judging what's, I would say, a CDH card and what's a regular card. But I'm still I want to have fun. I want to play a deck my way. The goal is I want to have fun and I want to enjoy these cards. I do want to try to win, but I'm not putting cards in there and taking away cards that I really enjoy just because I'm like, well, this card gives me a better chance to win. I don't run my decks that way because if you wanted to just pick the deck that wins the most, I'm sure you could look at some statistic of games that have been recorded and played and be like, hey, that commander gives you the best chance to win if you build it this way. And people are like, okay, that's a whole different thing. I'm not trying to do that. But overall, like I said, I'll get to it, but the Yu-Gi-Oh community, I feel like it's a lot less casual. Like, it is casuals and competitive players, but I feel like most people are in the competitive mind state in Yu-Gi-Oh. In Magic, there's a very big populace of people that at least play Commander, that's what they're there for, is to sit down, play with their buddies, have a good time, And obviously, like, you don't want to just like it's a very clear understanding. It's very healthy to go, okay, my deck that I have is extremely powerful, and if you use it against your opponents, you're like, okay, I played it once, I beat you. If you won, you're like, okay, I beat you, and then you retire that deck for the night, and you go, okay, that's over there. I won't use that the rest of the night. That's a very healthy thing. I feel like everybody in my play group is very open and cool with that. Obviously, if some new person showed up and they only had one deck and they won, we're not going to be like, well, I guess you can never use that deck again for the night if that's all they had. Normally, we would go, hey, you want to use one of our decks? That way we don't have to face that again tonight. But I feel like that's a very fair way where people don't get tired of seeing that deck. I mean, you might see it once a week, but you're not seeing it time after time after time after time if it's just winning. And if it's not winning consistently, then, you know, maybe it's not as bad to worry about. The next thing that I love about Magic is mana cost. Having a cost to things is so awesome and refreshing because it allows players to build up. It allows cards to be more fair because if every, like, and once again, I'll get to it, but everything in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is basically just, like, every archetype that comes out now feels like it's this card freely special summons. When it does that, search. When it does this, do something else. Pop that. Quick effect. Everything has a quick effect. Everything freely special summons. Everything has a graveyard effect that banishes to, like, add another card from your hand or bring something back. Everything just more value, more value. It's night and day. I mean, they've added, I would say, a whole Bible chapter onto every single card now that's been printed. And it is funny because, like, Magic players, I've watched videos of people making jokes about, like, they try to read a Yu-Gi-Oh card and they're like, why is there so much text on this? And I used to be like, it's really not that bad. And then when you get used to playing Magic and then you go back to Yu-Gi-Oh, you're like, God, there's a lot of text on this. Just, like, there has to be an easier way to do that. Magic just does a better job of, there's certain cards where it's like, because it has a mana cost, you might have let's say a 5 mana 6/6 that has trample. I mean, I think there might be one of those out there, I think. But if you read that, you'd be like, that's pretty good value. 5 mana for a 6/6 with trample, it's not bad. I mean, that might be all it does. Yu-Gi-Oh, that'd be unheard of to have a card that just said, like, one ability on it, and that's it. Like, imagine if a card just said this card has piercing. That's it. People be like, this card sucks. It doesn't do anything. So, yeah, having a mana cost, I think, is necessary. That's why the card game that I want to make, which would be part card game, part tabletop, but I'll get into that but at another time. But having a mana cost is, like, I feel like it's necessary. As much as I love Yu-Gi-Oh! And what it used to be, their original cost was, you know, getting out stronger monsters, you get the tribute summon. Come to find out, people said, wow, this takes so long, that they're like, well, what's a better way we can do this? They started messing with the extra deck mechanics, and then eventually got to a point where they're like, well, now people want to do this even without going into that extra deck monster, so why don't we just make things free special summon? Special summon got its name because it was supposed to be a special thing that happens where it doesn't happen very often. And now you might get, and I think this is, like, on average, you will get probably 10 special summons a turn, if not more. And obviously someone might not even need their normal summon. So it's crazy. The normal summon is not so normal anymore. The special summon is definitely not special anymore. But that's just a rant on Yu-Gi-Oh! But yeah, having a mana cost, I think, is super necessary. Number 2 thing I love about Magic is long games, at least with Commander, having long games. Yu-Gi-Oh! You sit down and basically by turn 1, you can figure out, 1, what someone's playing, 2, how the game's going to go depending on what's in your hand. Because you go, I either have something to stop what they're doing or I don't. And if I don't, I'm probably dead on the next turn because every deck can now OTK. Every deck can put out more than 8,000 attack points. That's why I think, 1, they need to raise the life point limit. You know, and people might say that sucks because there's a lot of burn decks or FTK decks that are inconsistent but should still be in the game. And I agree with that, like, if you got a fluky FTK, I don't think it should be completely banned. I don't think FTKs are completely degenerate. If it's fluky as hell and very hard to get to and requires multiple card setups that are hard to get, maybe not searchable, and you get it, I don't think you should be penalized for that. That should be a thing that's like, it's a fluke thing that happens. But my problem is everything's searchable now, and in Magic, it's like I could take my opening hand, have 2 lands, and 5 cards that are, like, all high CMC that I'm like, I can't play this anytime soon. But because of Magic and things having cost, I know that I should get at least, like, 4 turns would be, like, the minimum amount of time where someone might be able to, like, do some crazy combo and kill all of us. But for the most part, that, like, never happens. I would say 95% of the time in my playgroup, maybe more than that, 98% of the time in my playgroup, everyone's still alive by turn 4. Plenty of life. So, yeah, it just Magic's a completely different game, but having the mana cost just turns it into a more enjoyable experience. Now, don't get me wrong, you still have games that you feel, God, this is taking so long. This game's been going on for like an hour and a half, which happens, and you're just like, I just want this game to be over with, because it's like when someone like kind of removes things from the board constantly, but then they don't have enough firepower to get the game over with. That can be annoying. It'd be the equivalent of Yu-Gi-Oh! If someone's like, I can pop that, or banish that, and then you're like, okay, can you go into something in your extra deck to kill me? And they're like, no, all I got's this like weak-ass monster. Okay, the last thing that I love about Magic is playing with your friends. I know Yu-Gi-Oh! Came out with some new format, Cross Duel, I think, but supposedly it had like an app or something, and then it got canceled, or had, I don't know, it had a game that apparently was sucked and was buggy, so they canceled it. I don't know if that's still a thing. Like I said, I haven't been keeping up with that, but it just took them 20 years too long, because if Yu-Gi-Oh! Had made cards the way Magic has, and Magic was very smart about it, that Magic doesn't say, you know, you and your opponent, it says like opponents. So a lot of cards are like, well, this can have multiple options if you have multiple opponents, or choose target opponent. In Yu-Gi-Oh! It's just like, well, you and your opponent do this. So there's a lot of cards that just straight up don't work if you were to have multiple people. I mean, you can obviously kind of change the rules a little bit, where any card that says like mess with your opponent or choose some of your opponents, you could just say choose opponent. So that's one way to kind of get around it. I think it is possible to do it with Yu-Gi-Oh! I think it'd just be a little harder. So, but I don't know. Like in Yu-Gi-Oh! They did double duels, so I think that it is possible, because basically you just take the rules and you just kind of expand them to every player. Like if a card says, you know, each player does this, it still affects everybody if you got 2 players or 4. But yeah, playing with my buddies every week has been one of the nicest things. It's one of the, I mean, it may sound depressing to you guys, but it's one of the things I look forward to the most in my life is, you know, if my regular week's kind of crap, I go, well, I'm meeting up with everybody. You know, they're coming over to play Commander for a couple hours, and that's fun. Granted, I don't feel like we play as long as we used to. I mean, there was a time where me and my buddies, we'd get together at like 4 p.m. and then we'd play till like 4 or 5 in the morning. I mean, that doesn't really happen anymore. And this was even a couple years ago. I'm not saying this is like when we were kids where we didn't have like jobs, but you know, just times change. People don't have the same free time, but you try to find the time where you can. But it's something that you know, I moved to Los Angeles last year briefly for a couple months, and then I moved back. And one of the things I definitely missed was being able to get together with my buddies and just hang out and play, because that's the cool thing. You just order some pizza, hang out, shoot the shit, have a good time. And Yu-Gi-Oh! It's not that it's not possible to do that. It's just that when it's 1v1, it just, to me, Yu-Gi-Oh! Becomes, when it's 1v1, it's more of like super serious poker game kind of thing of like, okay, I got to stay super focused. Magic, I can relax, because it's like there's no stakes, and it's like there's so many different ways I could lose/win. Like, I could win a game in Commander because my other 3 opponents were busy messing with each other, and they left me alone because they're like, well, poor him, he doesn't have any of his board. And then I come out with something in one turn, and I go, hey, I win the game. Or vice versa. Like, if I lose, I'm like, I didn't really have anything in my hand. No biggie. But there's other interactions that are happening. You're not the sole focus. In Yu-Gi-Oh!, when it's just 1v1, if you don't have anything and you lose and you get scraped within a turn or two, like, your opponent kind of looks at you like, man, you need to work on your deck. Your deck sucks. And you're like, it's not that my deck sucks. I just drew a crappy hand or whatever. It just is what it is. So it's just different. It's a different vibe, different feeling. But Yu-Gi-Oh! Can be really fun. But we'll get to that. All right. So those are the things I love. Now let's be negative. So yeah, I'll save Yu-Gi-Oh! To last. I'll do Magic. So the number 5 thing, the things I hate about Magic, 80% of the cards in the sets are not good cards. And this is coming from a Commander player. I understand that draft is a format. I understand that, you know, people, a lot of the commons that come out, like you said, for draft, they want to have these cards. I just feel like it's a waste when you look at most of the cards. You go, no one's ever going to play that. Most commons don't ever see play because they're not all that good. Now, occasionally you do get some that are really good and people throw them into their Commander deck, but overall, I think it's really hard to find. I mean, sometimes I'll look at a Magic set because there's so many cards in it, and you are just kind of looking for that color, like the gold or the orange, or even the silver for an uncommon, and you're just like, okay, I'm just going to read these cards, and if they're good, I'll play them. If they're not, I won't use them. But it's just so many cards to look through in a set that sometimes it just feels like, well, I don't have the time to read through every single one of these, especially if 80% of them suck. And I might be underdoing it. It might be more than 80%. Like I said, occasionally, if you find things for an archetype, that will be nice. And I say archetype, theme. If you find things for a theme that are lower rarity, that's all good. I mean, that's something that we all look forward to. I wish they would take those common slots and fill those in with cards that are needed for like a certain tribe. Like, let's say dogs. Let's say someone that plays dogs is like, man, I could use just like a bigger dog to like run in my deck. It doesn't have to have any crazy ability, just a bigger one. That would be something that you could throw in there and make it a common and be like, oh, well, here's more things for those options. A lot of times I know they love being thematic in Magic for their sets, which is nice, but at the same time, I do feel like there's a lot of missed opportunities because they're just like, well, everything has to be thematic for the set. And it's like, they do a lot of things with new mechanics where they go, okay, this set's going to have this mechanic and this mechanic. And the problem is, like I know that I felt this way with Phyrexia All Will Be One. I was initially hyped for that set, and then I read the cards, and I'm like, everything has Toxic on it. And I'm like, I don't really care to do that. So what happens? I don't end up playing those cards. And once again, I know this is coming from Commander standpoint, so not everyone has that view. I know Standard players have a different view on new cards that come out, Modern, Legacy, all that stuff. Number 4 thing I hate about Magic, the lack of ban list changes. So, and this is talking about Commander. Commander has a ban list. It's made by the Commander Rules Committee or Advisory Group. I think it's the Rules Committee technically, and then the Advisory Group is the people that devise the Rules Committee. But I know the guy that created EDH, Sheldon, I think is the guy's name. I know he just passed away recently, which really sucks. Obviously, I didn't know him, and I'm fairly new to Commander in the last couple of years, so I didn't know all of his whole backstory. But he seemed like a nice guy whenever I saw him. I saw him in like the Professor's channel a few times. But what I would say is Yu-Gi-Oh! Obviously, they make busted cards and then they hit them on the list later, and that's a crazy, to print a card knowing this card needs to be banned, but we're going to print it anyway to get people to buy it for the format. I don't like that. Now, that being said, Yu-Gi-Oh! Will still update the list and be very interactive about, we're hearing rumblings about this card. This card's being spotted in this many decks. Okay, we need to hit this. And obviously they have the banned, semi-limited, and limited that they can do. Or, unlimit something that was banned or on the list. But Magic is just like, things are either banned or they're not. Obviously in Commander, everything's singleton, so there is no, different copies that you can run, different number of copies. It's either it's legal or it's not. But the thing I'll say is, when I look at the Yu-Gi-Oh! Ban list, there's, a few cards on there that I go, I think those could probably come back, or I think there's definitely cards out there that need to be banned, but there's normally only a few that I think need to come back. When I looked at the Magic ban list, it just feels kind of weird. I guess it's the same thing. There's cards that I go, why is that legal? Why do we think that's okay? And then there's other cards that they're just like, that's too powerful. And I'm like, why can't I think? Iona, Shield of Emeria, that's a card that I would love to see back. And they're like, yeah, but it could lock out a monocolored deck. And I'm like you can't lock somebody out anyway. And that gets into other stuff. But yeah, that's something I would like. It spices up and keeps the game a little fresh if you go, hey, this card was a problem a few years ago. Excuse me. We're going to reintroduce it into the format and just see how it does. And if it's still busted, we'll take it out again. But we want to give it a trial run. I wish they would do that more often. Or, same thing, opposite end, I wish they would ban a card and go, we want to see what the format looks like without this card. Because personally for me, Sol Ring, we've house banned it, but that's a card that doesn't need to exist in the format. It doesn't add anything good or positive to the format at all. Okay, number 2, top 5 things I hate about Magic, infinites. Yu-Gi-Oh! Doesn't have infinites. I mean, don't get me wrong, Yu-Gi-Oh! Still has degenerate things that happen in it, but when someone builds a deck in Magic around an infinite, then I just kind of go, well, you did it, buddy, congrats. To me, it goes against what the game is supposed to be. And I'm all for if you found some weird combo that basically gives you some sort of advantage, I get all that. And depends on how many cards make your infinite. If it takes 3, 4, 5 cards to make your infinite, I'm like, okay, I guess props to you. You kind of stumbled on that right thing. But when it's just 1 or 2 cards and it's well, this does this now. These cards interact this way where I have an infinite. I'm like, I don't know. I just don't like it if you run those cards in your deck, because then I'm like, you didn't really want to play a match. You just wanted to get to your, I don't know what you want to call it, your nuclear weapon as fast as possible. And I don't really know what that proves when you beat people, and I don't really see how that's fun. But and number one thing I hate about Magic is copies. Like Yu-Gi-Oh doesn't. I guess there's a few cards in the game that basically make a token that's a copy of something, but for the most part in Yu-Gi-Oh that's not really a thing. If you get rid of the original thing, like that's it. Unless they have, I guess they run different multiple copies in the deck, but that's a separate topic. There's my dog. Leo, lay down, lay down. But in Magic, everything you can make a copy of basically anything, an artifact, a creature, enchantment, whatever. You can make a copy of it, and I just think there's so many cards like create X token copies or this sorcery effect, copy it X times. Like I played my buddy Brendan the other day, and he did that, and then we kind of talked about it like 5 to 10 minutes after the game. One of our other buddies left, and we just kind of sat there and talked about, man, I just got to tell you, like, I don't think that's fun for anybody, and I don't see how that's fun for you, but I guess that's your jam. Our whole policy with Commander is if it's legal on the list, Leo, go on. Come on. Sorry. Our whole policy is if it's legal on the list, you should be able to play it. Now, don't get me wrong. There's cards that we go, I don't agree with that being legal, but it is what it is. You can't always pick and choose what's okay and what's not, because what certain people love and enjoy, other people don't, and vice versa. Like, I love playing big dinos in my dinosaur deck. Brendan can't stand it. But it's like, I don't have a right to tell him you can't do certain things with your artifact deck that I find lame. I just don't like making copies and copies and copies and copies. Like, I don't like things that get up to, like, hundreds of copies or anything like that. I just find that boring and degenerate and shouldn't be in the game. Okay, and lastly, we'll do the top 5 things I hate about Yu-Gi-Oh! So, 5, dull card text. And what I mean by this is, like Magic, you'll have cards that do similar effects, but for the most part, I don't feel like you just, like, roll your eyes going, yup, same stuff. With Yu-Gi-Oh! And it did not used to be like this. There used to actually be, like, diversity in cards. And don't get me wrong, you'd have cards that could special summon, but there was normally, if this card special summons, you have to either send cards, do something. There was some sort of cost to it to get there was a hard condition to get it to summon itself. Now it's everything just goes, hey, do you control no monsters? Free special summon this. Hey, do you control a monster of this whole archetype, which of course you're going to play together? That's really important. Special summon this. They require nothing. Even back in the day, I actually didn't mind cards that would say, like, you got to banish certain things out of your graveyard to get this from your hand, to special summon it. I didn't mind that because there's at least some sort of cost. You banish some resources, they go away. Yes, you might have some fluke card to get them back in your graveyard, but for the most part, there is some sort of cost to it, and there is some sort of setup. With everything now, there's what they call a setup is like no setup. Controlling no monsters, you start the game, you control no monsters. Boom, there you go. That's hard. You control a creature of this archetype. Like I said, you draw your hand. Hey, free special summon, and they all work together because they always plan this. Free special summon this card. This card affects search, and I'll get to the archetype that I really can't stand, but it's just become dull. And everything has a quick effect negate. Everything does quick effect, negate the activation of this, destroy it, or banish it, or your opponent does anything quick effect. That just is so boring to me. And it is nice that in Magic, yes, things have quick effects, but it's just different. There is cost to, like, it's just different in Magic. Like, not saying that it can't be busted that someone could quick effect respond to what you do. It just feels different in Magic because there is cost to doing things. Normally, things that have quick effects might require some mana to do it, or you might have to, like, pitch cards out of your hand or something like that. There's at least something. It's not just quick effect, this costs me nothing, I get to do whatever I want. There's always some sort of setup, and normally it's like, yeah. Alright, next thing is new mechanics. So this is mainly me talking about, like, the pendulum mechanic and then the link mechanic. And obviously they're not new anymore because pendulums have been out since, I think, 2014 initially. So going on about 10 years now. And links came out in 2017. As far as I know, I don't think they've made any new... I don't see any new mechanics, but I don't know, I might be wrong. But yeah, those two mechanics I thought broke the game. Like, and I don't think they need to keep pushing it. I think Yugioh had a really good foundation. Fusions was obviously cool, interesting. Everyone wanted to do fusions. Then the GX era happened, and then they're like, well, we're going to, like, dive into fusions. Like, we're going to really make fusion archetypes like elemental heroes, destiny heroes are a thing, roids. I'm trying to think of other examples. I know there's other gladiator beasts, stuff like that, where we want to lean into that, like make it more, because Yu-Gi-Oh speeds up over time, and I think, with more cards at your disposal, you're eventually going to not just set monster face down, set one spell or trap, go. Like, I think it's okay to have more interesting, diverse plays on your turn one, so that's why increasing the speed of the game was good initially. We got synchros, which sped up the game, and initially I didn't like, because I thought it was too ridiculous. Then eventually I was like, once you get used to it, it's actually like it is good for the game to speed it up and get it past to the point of where it was. XYZs I liked. I thought it was just a different version of a synchro. You didn't need a special tuner, but you did need your two monsters to at least have some sort of matching something, which I know some people hate it because they go, well, yeah, if you're running this archetype, it might be everything is that level, or, things are obviously made to get those cards out. But I'm like a rank 4 toolbox deck couldn't go into, I'm trying to use a example card, like Red Eyes Flare Metal was a good card, an XYZ that, I think that's what his name, Red Eyes Flare Metal, yeah. The rank 7 that basically says every time your opponent tries to do, like, activate an effect, burn them for 500. Strong card, not as strong as it used to be, obviously, because that was made years ago. But anyway, that's a card that, a rank 4 toolbox deck can't go into that card. So it's like you don't have everything at your disposal. You only have to stick with what's rank 4s. Then pendulums came along, and I didn't like them because I thought they cheated the rules of being part spell, part monster. That didn't make sense to me. But also, they made 2 extra zones on the mat, which I didn't like, and then they did it again in the following upgrade. But I didn't like that, and the most disgusting thing ever was someone going, play it, pop, search, and then they would search out another pendulum monster, play that one in the same spot, and then pop the other one, search, and everything's going on with their extra monster, their extra deck, and they would stack there, and then when they're finally done, and they've done that like 4 or 5 times, and they're like, okay, cool, look at my skills, pendulum summon, then give them all back out. And then the thing that sucked, and I couldn't think of any other time in existence where this would happen, where I was like, unless they banish those cards, like if you top decked a Regeki and they had a full board of monsters, even if they could all be destroyed, you play Regeki, the fact that they didn't have to draw another card, they could go, okay, they all go back to the extra deck, and the next turn I'll just pendulum summon again. That I hated because it gave you extra advantage for nothing, just for playing this mechanic, which I don't think should be a thing. So, hated that. They eventually nerfed them where now you have to, like, pendulum monsters that are coming from the extra deck have to go to either the extra monster zone or a zone, a link monster points to. That I at least like that they checked those. And then links, obviously they came out. What I hate about links is that they're so generic. I mean, I used to go into rants about this all the time. Anytime you could make a link monster that requires 2 or more, you could make an Xyz, or you could make a synchro. That's my problem with it, is that it requires no special setup. It's like 2 effect monsters, 2 monsters with different names, 3 monsters with different names. It's like clap, clap, clap. That's so hard to do. So yeah, the problem is the most busted ones, or at least the ones that are like really good, it's just so easy for you to just out whatever your opponent has. If you have 2 monsters and your opponent has a spell or trap that's giving you problems, but they're not stopping you from special summoning or using effects, you can just go into one of the nightmares and be like, I'll get rid of that, pop it. There's other examples, but anyway, yeah, I can't stand the mechanics. So anyway, yeah, new mechanics, that's what I've hated with Yu-Gi-Oh! And it's nice that Magic hasn't tried to be that innovative, where Magic has a good thing and we're like, no, we're going to keep it like this and just keep it the way it is. That's why people like the game. So yeah, and then the next thing is lack of format options. So I know Yu-Gi-Oh! Has expanded recently where they've gone into, there was GOAT format. Obviously there's regular Yu-Gi-Oh!, which is, everything that's not on the ban list is legal. But you had GOAT format, which I don't remember what era. I mean, I remember the era, but I don't remember when the cutoff was. I think it's literally original DM monsters, so like everything Invasion of Chaos and back. My problem with that is the card selection has kind of been figured out. When you have a small card pool, the professor and Vince talk about this with Magic, where they talk about things like tiny leaders, formats that have died out, where if you only have so many options, people will eventually figure out what are the best options, and the format solves itself, and now it's like, well, there's only a couple different variations, but it's basically you run these cards and that's it. GOAT format never interested me, and don't get me wrong, I want to get into the idea I had, but maybe I shouldn't get into it. Maybe I should save it for another video. But yeah, that doesn't interest me because I want to play other things. And then I know they have Edison, which I don't remember exactly when that cutoff was. I don't know if it's 2011, 2012. I don't know. Maybe it's 2010. But I know Black Wings are a prominent deck in Edison. Edison sounds like more my cup of tea. But at the same time, the problem when you cut it off to a time is there's a lot of modern cards that come out to support old decks, and they're not busted. And it's like, hey, this is just helping the deck like actually do something, or give it a different play or something different that it could do. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's busted. Every new card that Konami prints is not exactly they're not equal. So like Gishki's got new support recently. It's pretty good. It's not on par with the new archetypes that are coming out with Yu-Gi-Oh right now. It doesn't turn Gishki's into like on their level. So that's my thing, is it's not the same. Generally for me, if I'm looking at new cards, and I'll get into this, I guess, but if I'm looking at new cards, I'm like, how busted are you, or how easy? If it's too dumb easy, where I'm like, I roll my eyes at like someone thinking they're good because they play this deck and win with it, then I'm like, I'm not interested, man. I'm good. So yeah, but lack of format options with Magic, it's nice that, you know, if you wanted to play Standard, you can do that. But obviously, me being a Commander player, it's nice that that format exists. If Commander didn't exist, I wouldn't be playing Magic, I don't think. But Commander is just the perfect format to, hey, I'm a casual player, I just want to have a good time. That's part of like the foundation of the rules of Commander, is like, hey, cards will be banned if they stop people from having a good time. And there's a difference between going, hey, this card sucks for you, but literally cards that are like, they're too easy to just go, hey, you win the game, or everyone's just going to be miserable this entire time. So, and there's still cards that they could ban or cards that they could bring back, but overall, Magic has other formats, you know, Standard, Modern, Legacy that I mentioned, even Oathbreaker with Planeswalkers as your commander, which is different, and having a signature spell. There's just different creative ideas. Yu-Gi-Oh! I feel like people have gotten so used to just the regular way you play that I guess the only other format, like I said, is GOAT, Edison. Personally, for me, I think doing double duels or just changing things up, trying to do a commander style of Yu-Gi-Oh! Would be fun. I don't know if it's possible, but I'd like to see that. I think you could do a 1v1v1v1 duel, like 4 people, like a commander game against each other. I think you could totally do that in Yu-Gi-Oh! You would just have to tweak that certain things can only target, you know, it can let you target any opponent, not just the person that you normally would sit across from. Okay, number 2 thing I hate about Yu-Gi-Oh! Toxic community. So one of the reasons why I wanted to start this video tonight is I checked the notifications for this channel, and it was actually for a Magic video, and it was a guy commenting on the deck. And if you see this, man, I'm sure you were just trying to help out, but Magic players generally are a lot cooler about this, but I'll just call him out on it. Yeah, he was trying to give me recommendations for my deck, but did it in kind of a snarky way where he goes, doesn't look like you have a whole lot of ramp or card draw or interaction, and he's like, generally that's a weak deck. And I'm like, I'm not asking, like, it is very different for me to come on and be like, hey, I'm making a deck, but I'm not sure about it. If you guys have any recommendations, feel free. I'm putting it out there for more information for somebody, but it's not really there for when I say it's not there for criticism, obviously anything you put online could be criticized. But what I'm saying is, I'm not putting my deck profiles out there saying this is the absolute 100% best deck profile that you could ever have out there. Like, there are other channels for that, because at the end of the day, what am I? I'm a casual player. I'm playing to have fun. Don't get me wrong, I still want to win, but I'm not. There are cards that I see that I go, yep, I can recognize that card's good. I don't want to play it. And that's the differences that some people don't understand. And I'll just talk about it. So he said in his comment that the deck doesn't have card draw. It does have card draw. I think it actually draws cards pretty well. But it is also in black and white, which are not exactly the best. Black has some decent card draw, which it's in there, but it's not the best color for card draw. So you're limited there. Ramp. Black and white don't ramp very well. There are a few options. I'm not playing the most signature, and I said it in top 5 things I hate about Magic. Staples. Like, there are cards that everyone just uses, and if it's, okay, I run a black deck, this card's got to be in there. We all have our personal favorites, but there's cards that you know what I mean. Like, the card, there's like lands that basically for black will say like everything becomes a swamp, or tap, add an extra black for every swamp you control, or something like that. Every swamp you control taps for additional. A lot of people play the same cards in there, And I'm not saying I don't play any staples in any of my decks. Like in green, you'll see Rampant Growth and stuff like that, but I think that's a little bit different because they're not overly powerful cards. They're just cards that help. But yeah, like for me, Mana Rocks. I don't like Mana Rocks. The medallions are my Mana Rocks. And if I tried to explain to someone, they'd be like, "That your logic doesn't make any sense." I just like them. I like the chance that if I had multiple cards that had a color in my hand, if I had 2 black spells and I play Jet Medallion, I get double reduction. Is that always going to happen? No. Would it probably be better overall if I just had the 1 free mana every turn? Sure, for a Mana Rock. I just don't want to do that. It's just not, it's not me. I don't like them. Personal preference. I don't want to do that. Once again, I'm not telling someone this is the definitive version of the deck and you have to play it this way. I'm saying this is how I play it. Once again, there are decks that I come out with that I'll say, I tried to build this, but I'm not very familiar with the strategy or this card or this interaction or how this works. If you guys have any suggestions or recommendations, feel free to give them to me. If I said, hey, this deck's really struggling, I don't know what to do with it, recommendations, it's different. I know people are going to leave comments anyway and say, like, your deck sucks or, it needs this. And he didn't say my deck sucks. He just was basically saying it's a weak deck. And like I told him, I said, well, it hasn't lost in our play group when I've been playing it. And my buddies do not have a weak play group. I mean, one of the new guys that plays with us, he's an old friend, but basically we just got him into Commander. He's dishing out like some serious money to like upgrade his decks and get good cards. So like he's not playing like weak stuff. He's got a Cyclonic Rift in one of his decks. He's got some other stuff, but we kind of just make jokes. Me and my other buddy Brendan, we're just like, he's going for it like that. His decks just get more powerful. But anyway, so I'm not playing at some super low rated like table where everyone's playing like stuff that like can't even hurt you until like turn 10. No, like I'm playing at a pretty, I would say like our overall power levels in our decks are probably 8s. Probably not 10s or 9s because we're not running a bunch of tutors in our decks. Like we've kind of outlawed those just because it makes, if a card searches for a specific card in an archetype or a tribal thing, a little different. But if it's like just generic tutor, we're like, nah, we haven't officially banned it, but it's just like kind of frowned upon. Like it's not really what we're trying to do because all that does is just speed up the game and make it less fun, I think. But yeah, but I said toxic community. I just want to get back to it. So Magic overall, like I said, very positive, very understanding of someone wanting to play casual. Yu-Gi-Oh, it was never that for me. I mean, for every one comment that I had that was like, hey man, your deck's casual and I appreciate that. I like your deck. Like keep doing your thing. I'd say I probably got 20 comments of people like, your deck sucks. You don't know what you're doing. You don't know how to run your deck. And my thing is, I've never been a super competitive Yu-Gi-Oh player. It's just not been my thing. I clearly can. The competitive players always get this twisted. They think the casual players are dumb because they go, wow, look at all the dumb shit they try to run in that deck. What a fucking idiot. And for me, it's like, I see what you guys are running that are super competitive, and your decks are all the same. And to me, that's boring. My number one goal is not to win. My number one goal is to have fun. Then if I can win doing the thing I like to do and have fun with it, that's what I want. If I can't do that, like, and I'll just go into this because it'll be going into my next topic, but Kashtira's are a deck in Yu-Gi-Oh that has, I think, just started to get hit. They lost a few things on the ban list, but overall, on Master Duel, I'm having to play them basically full power. I think everything's legal on Master Duel. I hate it. I think I have to admit, it's the most hated deck I've ever had that I've gone up against. It locks out your zones, your spell and traps and monsters, has everything that you do triggers an effect that lets someone banish, and then that triggers one of their other monsters' effects to banish more cards off your deck. And then they also just everything free special summons and everything searches for everything. So anyway, I already hate it for that reason. But my thing is, if I wanted to win, I would look at that deck, go, wow, that's retardedly powerful. And I'd go, yeah, I'll just pick that deck and I'll play that. But I wouldn't be any different from anybody else that's on here, for one. Two, I wouldn't be enjoying it because that's not my jam. Not that I don't like being like, a little degenerate sometimes, or just like, trying to ruin someone's day. I have my Final Countdown deck that I try to ruin someone's day on, and that's my goal. But it does it in a different way. The cards are balanced in the sense of every one of my cards doesn't, I play it, I instantly go search for something else so it pays for itself. I freeze special summon everything on my hand. No, things have cost, or at least they used to. And that's what I like to use. Still feels like I'm playing a card game. But yeah, the Yu-Gi-Oh community doesn't really understand that concept, that people might not want to play that, but that doesn't mean they're stupid. It just means we want two separate things out of this game, which is why I think Yu-Gi-Oh needs to split into a competitive, casual, and then make separate ban lists. I think Commander needs to do the same thing. We call it EDH and CEDH, CEDH being competitive. There are cards and styles in Commander. Cards that specifically I'm like, yeah, if someone was playing competitive, I'm like, that should be legal, they can go do that. But at a casual table, the power level of certain cards doesn't match with a casual player's deck. And I'm mainly just talking about cards that can cheat cost, but not like a cool, fun way. Like, I love Sunbird's Invocation. If you play a card from your hand, you get to look at the top of your deck for however expensive that card was that you played, and possibly cast something if it falls within that mana range of whatever you played initially. Yu-Gi-Oh! Doesn't have a mana cost, so there's nothing... Like, there doesn't stop anybody. What I'm saying is, like, if I'm playing Mermails from basically 2013, yes, updated a little bit, but overall, it's an archetype from 2013, 2012. I can have fun with it, and I can love it, and I'm looking to play someone that's kind of on my scale, my level, but it's impossible to find if you jump on an online game with Yu-Gi-Oh! Because it's like, everyone's just playing to, like, I need to win, and I'm like, I don't get what the incentive is to try and win. I don't get it. But anyway, yeah, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Community, it's different because, like, I had friends, and I still kind of do. I mean, there's some friends in the community that I reach out to occasionally, but the friendships that I made from Yu-Gi-Oh!, that's a big part of my life that I had. But I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about everybody else in the community of strangers, people you don't know. You'll occasionally find some nice people that are pretty cool that are on your level, but for the most part, at least online, it's everyone's just trying to be super competitive, and it's like, if you are not with that mindset, you're just a scrub, you're an idiot, you don't know how to build decks. I mean, they call you casuals as like an insult, and I'm like, yeah, that's what I am. I'm a casual. It's like, I'm not dedicating my life to be a pro Yu-Gi-Oh! Player. I'm not willing to buy hundreds of dollars worth of cards for a meta deck that everyone else is already running. Because if you're running the same thing that everyone else is running, what's the point? What are you proving? I'm the best with this deck? No, Konami made the deck for a 5-year-old to play. So I don't... Like, if you take Cash Tiras and take let's say a 5-year-old that knows how to play the game. Like, I'm teaching my daughter how to play Magic. She's 6, but she's getting the basic premise of the game. But let's bump it up to like 8 years old. If you take an 8-year-old and run Cash Tira, and they run Cash Tira, and I run, let's say, Agents, I'm going to lose. As long as they know what they're doing, they're going to beat me. Because that deck is just superior to mine, because it gives you more advantage, has more quick effect responses, free special summons, less cost. They win. It's not... People kind of... Like, they try to make it out like, well, then why are the same players topping all the time? And I'm like, probably because they're the ones that have the resources to go to all these tournaments, have the resources to get all the cards they need for the deck, and fill out the side deck, and fill out the extra deck, and they spend all their time working on... This is the part you could go, oh, well, this is a credit to them. They're playtesting nonstop. Well, guess what? Most people have regular jobs that, unless they got a bankroll from something else, they normally can't just play Yu-Gi-Oh! Full time. So, I don't know. At some aspect, I respect someone that comes up with a cool tech. I respect someone that finds a good matchup against the meta and can combat it and run something. That I respect in Yu-Gi-Oh! I don't respect the people that just run the same stuff that everyone else is running. I just don't. Why would you do it? I don't understand the incentive for it. Anyway. Now to number one thing I hate about Yu-Gi-Oh! Is the power creep. Modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Just kind of sucks. And the reason I got out of the game was because I eventually just hit my breaking point where I was like, why am I even playing this stuff anymore? Because I would build a deck, think I'm going to have fun, be like, yeah, deck building was so fun, and then I play it, and it's like, oh, you got scraped in turn 1, you lost. And I'm like, why am I doing this still? So for me, Yu-Gi-Oh! It's gotten so off the rails with what it's become with the power creep that I don't think... The only way to save Yu-Gi-Oh! And keep going is to take a ban hammer, just take a hammer and go, we're banning everything that basically gets super crazy advantage that has no cost. Getting rid of all of it. If that includes a full archetype, screw it. We got to get rid of it. And then basically keep everything, I think, around like the 2014, 2015, 2016 power level of like, it's good, but it does require this setup. It's good, but it only works with these cards. It's good, but it's only in this archetype. It's good, but it's only good in this interaction. Or it costs this amount of life points to do. Now it's like there's no cost for anything. It's just the Wild Wild West, and it's like it's not fun. I enjoy going against like someone else that at least is on the same wavelength as me. Is like, you know, hey, we're both trying to play casual. Let's just have some old school fun. If the game ends in like turn 2, turn 3, turn 4, it depends how it goes, but you would like to have a back and forth. But yeah, the power creep. My solution is what I want to do is I want to go back in time and do like original Yu-Gi-Oh tournaments starting from like Legend of Blue Eyes and then progress one set at a time, and eventually you build up to like the present. But it gets you a chance to replay these formats and just use different decks. I want to do that, but I'm probably in an hour with this, but I hope you guys enjoyed this. I would say this was kind of a rant, but I'm not. It's 6:30 in the morning as I'm recording this, and I have neighbors, so I'm not trying to wake them up by yelling or whatever, being ridiculous. But yeah, just in general, there's a lot of things. Like overall, Magic doesn't have too many things I think they need to tweak. They just liven it up a little bit. But I do notice that I go back and forth occasionally where Magic I stick with longer now that I'm fully into it. But I'll be like, man, I kind of miss Yu-Gi-Oh a little bit. I want to go back and see what's up. And then I go back and see what's up, and then I'm like, yeah, I remember why I left. I mean, just it's when Yu-Gi-Oh could still be fun if you're going against the right decks or people that are on. That's the thing. If you shrink the format down to when it was back to being fun and it was decks that you don't find to be busted, you're like, yeah, it can still be a good time. But things now, I'm just like, you either have to play the meta or play a deck that's built just to stop the meta. But it's just like you can't bring in some rogue thing and like hope to have a lot of success. You just won't, because there's just too many things you have to account for. I mean, I'm running a deck online where it's just, Jougans, Fossil Dynas, things to stop special summons, and a bunch of Threatening Roars, Thunder of Rulers, Wabakus, things to Zero Gardenas, things where I don't take battle damage, Battle Faders, Swift Scarecrows, Lava Golems, Winged Dragon of Ra, Sphere Modes, all these things to try to out my opponent's board where they can't respond to it, stop them from specialing, all that. I'm not doing that to be a dick. I mean, I do want to ruin those people's day, but in general, if I went up against somebody that was playing, like I said, Mermail, for example, but if they were playing an old school Mermail deck and I stopped them from special summoning, I'd feel bad because I'm like, that person's just trying to have a good time and play their old deck. But these new decks, I'm like, I have no sympathy for you, don't care. I think it's called Flurries, I don't remember what they're called. The little cat deck, I don't know, that's a Xyz deck. That deck's also pretty lame. I mean, it's not as lame as Kashtira, but the artwork on that looks so bad, and I don't know. That's all I keep seeing on Master Duel is basically those two decks, and I'm just kind of fed up with it and over it. But anyway, yeah, you can call this my rant, but I guess that's over. My question, I put a poll out, but I just am curious. If you're more for Yu-Gi-Oh, I'd like to. I'm not saying you have to leave a comment, but I don't know. If you could go in the poll and just say yes, I care more about Yu-Gi-Oh. I kind of want to know what my ratio is for the people that actually do watch these videos and go, how many of you are focused on Yu-Gi-Oh? How many of you focused on Magic? Is there anybody that's kind of both, where they keep up with both? I don't think financially it's either responsible or really all that possible to try to keep up with both card games at the same time. That's why for me, if I can do the format that I'm talking about with my buddies, where we just do house tourneys and do it like LOB and build back up, then I'm like, yeah, I'll make a paper deck of that. But in general, I just don't think it's worth it for Yu-Gi-Oh, because it's I can just do Master Duel for one and not have to spend any actual money on cards. But two, even if I did build a lot of these fun decks that I want to make in person, or my old decks, even if I built them, I play somebody in person, they're playing the new stuff, they scrape me immediately, I hate my life, and then I'm like, why did I spend money on these decks, bling them out, all that stuff, just for this person to do that? So I think I'm only going to get back into the paper card game of Yu-Gi-Oh! If, I don't know, I was making a really crazy income or something, I don't know. But in general, Magic, I feel like your cards retain better value, you're not worried about them getting banned as often, and I don't know, a card that you don't use in one deck, there's always a possibility. It's I could use that in something else. In Yu-Gi-Oh, it's I don't know, it's very rare that I go, hey, I wouldn't use this card in here, but I'll use it in this other deck. It's decks are very focused on this is what this deck does, and everything kind of needs to be focused on this. I don't find as many cards to be splashable, I think, in Yu-Gi-Oh as there are in Magic, except for extra deck stuff. But yeah, all right, well, that's been it for the rant. Hope you guys enjoy it. If you'd like to see more, let me know. But yeah, that's it for now. I'll try to record more of these. Peace.